Tom, thank you very much for taking the time to come in and see me today on Culture Corner, where I speak to leaders in tech about how they create strong cultures and high-performing teams. So it's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
No problem at all. Obviously, we've known each other for a while, so I know all about you and BJSS, but for anybody listening that doesn't know you, if you just give a bit of an overview of who you are, what you do, team sizes, business units, that kind of thing.
Sure, yeah. So Tom Pomfrett, I'm the head of delivery at BJSS in Leeds. BJSS is a tech consultancy, so we deliver lots of different services in that kind of tech consultancy space, headquartered in Leeds. So we were founded here about 30 years ago, but we've grown from our Leeds base into about 19 offices in the UK, 26 worldwide. So very big organisation, relatively big organisation now, but very proudly headquartered and founded by two folks in Leeds back 30 years ago. As part of my team in Leeds, we have a team of 7 of us that run our office here and looking after everything we deliver, all of our people, everything we do kind of out of Leeds basically.
Okay, perfect. Thanks very much, Tom. One of the things I wanted to ask you about first of all is culture. You think about building strong culture, so there's a sort of clear vision, purpose, shared values, that kind of thing. Is that very much present at BJSS? What's the culture like at BJSS? As you say, it's quite a large consultancy. So
yeah, so we were founded by 2 people who are very much practitioners of what they did, and that practitioner-led culture has always been really core to what we do. We've got 3 goals, values, however you want to kind of phrase them, which are, be a great place to work, deliver high quality services and grow in a sustainable way. And they've sort of stood the test of time. They're very, very simple. A lot goes into that, but we've kind of always based ourselves on do a good job.
Yeah.
Be really great at what we do, build great relationships and grow from there, take a lot of pride in what we do. And that really comes right from those 2 founders. They were sort of number 1 and number 2 project manager and developer effectively, and they went, right, we think we can do this better, we think we can do consultancy in a better way. And times have changed, tech changed, but that culture of doing a really great job, being proud of what we deliver, doing the right thing rather than just what's most profitable, it builds great relationships. And definitely. Some of our client relationships are now 30 years strong because of that. Wow. Because we've always had that really long-term view and wanting to do the right thing by our clients and our people.
Perfect. And is that, because we touched on it then, because they're a global organisation now, isn't it? Obviously lots of offices across the UK. Is the culture something that the senior leadership are very much focused on as part of your role? You mentioned the 3 values there. Obviously, they continually cascaded through the business. Is part of your remit really to focus on growing the culture and I suppose it's not just establishing it, growing it and evolving it, because it can be difficult in a business that size, can't it?
Absolutely, and retaining it, it's a really important thing. I think we are a company who wants to still have that simplicity of a culture of a 50-person company, but obviously scale that when you're talking about lots of different offices. So we put an awful lot of work into how do we get that balance of autonomy and giving local offices and local leadership that autonomy to really look after their people, do what's right for their clients locally, etc., but also make the best of that scale and reuse and the expertise we've got across the business. So I think the ongoing thing we're trying to manage is getting that balance right of autonomy and empowerment and making sure people feel part of their local office and the great culture they have there, but that culture forms a bigger part of that organisation and how that works, and that's not easy when you get to 2,000 to 3,000 people.
Yeah, exactly. I know a little bit about BJSS, and quite often there's some sort of inter-office projects, isn't it? That's the way best way of describing it. Do you think also that'll help with retaining that culture and having consistency across the business?
Yeah, definitely. It's you get a bit of the best of both worlds, and that's actually really changed over COVID, really, because we tended to try and prime projects principally from a given office, because there's definitely value in team building, getting teams co-located, working together day in, day out. But actually by doing that, you limit yourself to the skill set you have in that location. Suddenly we'll work remotely and location didn't matter so much. We were able to build the teams of the best possible skill set, best possible people, and obviously skill sets, not just technical skill sets, team balance, how you build a really great team that can work together. And you suddenly had 2,000 so folks to look at to build that team rather than 400 folks to look at. That's been a really positive thing. Now coming out of COVID, you're trying to get what's that great balance between best possible skill set and best possible people to form a team versus still having some of that co-location and knowing people as individuals and humans so that you form a great bond as a team that isn't just sat behind a screen all day and or on lots of Zoom calls. So that's an interesting balance we've been trying to strike as we come out of that pandemic world into whatever new normal or whatever horrible phrase you want to use to describe it. Yeah.
It changes on a daily basis, doesn't it? There's the phrase for that. So if you take we're talking about sort of values, purpose for a culture. You spun up lots and lots of teams over your time in tech. If you're building a high performing team as part of the podcast, and you're putting a team together, is it important to say to outline to the team, this is the purpose of this project, this is the value it's going to generate, this is what you're going to be delivering, some specific goals?
It is. I think there's lots and lots of things that go into building any given team. Having a shared understanding of what you're trying to achieve is crucial. I'm amazed the number of times I have a conversation about teams and saying, we need a platform engineer, and we need a developer. What you're trying to achieve, or we don't quite know. Well, how can you possibly know you need one of these and all of these then? So I think that is a really important thing. So there's obviously a value and culture part, but there's just literally fundamentally, what are you trying to do?
Yeah. Because
a team having that shared purpose and goal and going, this is what we're trying to achieve, ultimately sets them up for success. So, it's really important for us working with our clients that we're giving them the best possible value. To do that, we really need to understand what is it you're trying to achieve, what is it the problem you're trying to solve or the innovation you're trying to drive forward. And then our team is best shaped to then try and achieve that ultimately.
Around that. Okay, perfect. And as a leader within the team, I suppose it's your job to drive the behaviours and to, you need your team to trust you. How do you, if you're spinning up a team, how do you build that trust? I know there's going to be some people that have worked with you for a long time, know who you are, but if you're bringing new people into the business, how do you create that sort of sense of belonging in the team and develop the trust?
Yeah, I think that's really driven through the teams. Right. So you've got to build a team that and give them the tools they need to work as a team. Absolutely, as a leadership team, we will be there to support and help and do those things. But first and foremost, that comes down to, have you built the right team with the right people and the right balance? And some of that is skill set. What skills do we need to deliver whatever we're trying to deliver? But there's also, is that team well matched from a human perspective? Have you got different personality types that have mixed well? Have you got a rounded team in terms of seniority and experience? And we've talked about previously, sometimes you get a team that's really well formed and it finishes and it moves over here and starts a new project. And you think, brilliant, great, I don't have to go through any of that storming phase and everything's just going to work perfectly. But then you might need to add new people to that team, and all of a sudden you've got a problem because you've got a clique here that all worked together before, and you've got new people who can feel like a real outsider on the side of that. So you've got to make sure that team understands they have a responsibility to bring those people in and to make them feel welcome, make them feel like they can bring their whole selves to their job and they're part of that team. So, but we always try and drive that through the team doing that and the right people in the team driving that behaviour rather than it being a leadership responsibility or an oversight thing.
Right, okay. And do you find that that's more success? I suppose it's more successful, isn't it, having a group driving that?
People hate being told what to do. People like to be in charge of doing and being responsible for their own destiny. So I think if you can empower people to have those conversations and go, I know you want this to be a success. How are you going to make sure everyone who's part of this team feels like they can be part of it? Is far more compelling for an individual than it is to be told, go be nice to people. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, take them on that journey rather than telling them what to do. Basically, you mentioned the storming phase. Obviously creating a conflict, the forming, the storming. How do you deal with conflict? It's something that I'm not great at and tend to shy away from. But with your experiences, have you got any tricks of the trade as to how to navigate that?
Yeah, so a lot of people talk about the concept of psychological safety. So I think it's really important that that's really a feedback loop. So if people come to you and need support or there's concerns and while you're going through that phase, how you respond to that and support them, ultimately, if you support them well, they'll feel like they have the trust and safety to bring those things up to you again. So I think early on it's about making sure that that team knows that as a leadership team, but also within the team, that the support is there, and you provide that environment where people feel comfortable bringing things up. I am a really big believer though in solving things as close to the problem as possible. So I often get things escalated to me, and I say, well, have you spoken to the delivery manager? Have you spoken to the person that you're finding it difficult to work with? And, well, no, I haven't. Well, I think that encouraging that conversation, and making sure that's happened. And 99 times out of 100, you have that conversation. The person goes, "Oh man, I didn't know you felt that way. I'm really sorry." And actually, haven't directly. While no one enjoys those conversations, they really do tend to lead to a really good response and drives the team forward much better than someone having to get involved externally. So I'm really encouraging that storming phase, open honesty, and you can do that through creating opportunities and creating ceremonies or situations where you can have that. So great example in Agile would be your retrospective. If they're working well, you should have that psychological safety where you feel like it's not saying, and in the retro, I wish, Bill was not as mean to me, but it's going to go, actually, I found this really challenging. How do we as a team work on that and improve that as you go through that storming phase? So I think that there's lots of different pieces that all sort of nudge that in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. I think you hit on it then, creating an environment where there is a good culture, where there's psychological safety, so that person's got a voice, they feel confident that they can bring it up, they can share their concerns, can't they? And obviously, another great point you made, your reaction to it's got to be spot on, hasn't it? Otherwise, people aren't coming to you in future, and that's just going to generate issues further down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So which is perfect. I suppose one of the things I wanted to ask is around collaboration as well. Obviously, you're a tech organisation. Collaboration's key. We've had COVID, and now we're not sure what hybrid is. How do you ensure collaboration amongst your team and
Yeah, lots of ways, and COVID in many respects has taught us that it doesn't have to all be face-to-face. So I think we do try and make sure there's some face-to-face contact. I think once you've met somebody in person, they're just more of a human to you, and you might have some more ad hoc conversation, which isn't just about work, whereas kind of going, let's schedule 30 minutes to find out if you also like this thing I like, so we've got something in common. You don't really do it on Zoom.
No.
Whereas in person you get more of those conversations, and we've found those teams that understand each other as humans just are that much more willing to raise concerns and much more willing to go and ask for help, much more willing to work together in that way. So there is a degree of how do you get some of that face-to-face time, because I think it is really important from a team building and an ongoing perspective as well. But equally, not having to get everyone traipse 2 hours on a train or wherever it is to be together to run your sprint ceremonies or to do whatever you need to do. We've got an amazing set of tools now that help us with that, right. And we're all used to using them because we've had to get used to using them. So I think getting that combination of people who foster a collaborative environment and a tool set and the willingness to go and see each other and understand the wider human rather than just that person is a developer as part of my team. I think in combination all three of those things can be really helpful.
Yeah, I think from speaking to people over the last probably 12 months, that's a lot of business struggle with that, don't they? They say, right, how can we get that collaboration? How can we start building? I think it's all about building relationships, isn't it? Understanding the individual on a personal level, not a transactional process. If you're on Zoom, it's one Zoom meeting to the next, and there's no real time in between, or like you said, putting something in the diary to force that conversation, which is not natural.
Yeah.
So do you get people in at the beginning of projects or over a set period of time? Do you get people together for a designated period of time?
We've sort of stuck to one premise throughout that sort of evolution out of COVID, which is get people together for the right reasons.
Right, yeah.
So we've seen other companies be like, this is your mandated time together. And again, people don't like being told what to do generally. But also it's like, we have people, like you say, from lots of different offices that might work on a project. If you're in an office where most people are in Leeds and you are in Exeter, you going and sitting in an office on your own in Exeter doesn't really add a lot of value. So it's how do we get people together for really good reasons where you don't need to convince them because they're going, great, I want to go to that because that's a really good use of my time and I feel like I'll get value out of it. So how do you create those situations where people feel like it's a really great thing to collaborate face to face and get together? That's how we've approached it, rather than mandating anything per se.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That it is a very good idea. You're getting people to buy into that, aren't you? There's a lot of business where you see it on all the time in the news and on social media. There's a lot of businesses now mandating X number of days in the office for people. I've just spoke to a client this morning who said 4 days a week back in site for all their permies. Contractors don't have to be, but permies 4 days a week on site, which is rock the boat. Because a lot of the time you're getting people coming to the office and they're just sitting next to each other on Zoom calls to someone else, aren't they?
That's it. And there's some industries where actually that might be the right thing, because it is better to do that job in person. So I wouldn't sit there and go, that's a terrible idea for everybody. But it's, like I say, there's got to be a reason. If you just sat on the same Zoom calls, you could be sat on at home and aren't getting any of the benefits of being in that office that you want to achieve. All you're doing is frustrating people because they've got a bunch of wasted time in their commute or whatever it might be. So it's how do you make it so that people understand the value of what they're there for. And where we have had people come in, typically they come back in again because they went, oh yeah, I didn't really think there was much point because I can just do my job at home. And then I went in for a day and I really enjoyed it. I got to see all those people I haven't seen for ages, and then it's a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy because people see the value in doing it, or they don't, and they'll come in for the sort of limited number of reasons that it makes sense to. But we've got lots of people who come into the office because they like being in the office, and we've got some who come in for specific ceremonies, etc.
Yeah, and it works. It sounds like you've got it down to a T.
I would not say down to a T, but we're still exploring that. It's an evolving picture for sure, but we've just tried to make sure that we question the value at every point. Why are we making decisions we're making? And is it in the interest of balancing our people versus making sure we're delivering for our clients, and et cetera. Yeah, the flexibility
and being agile around it rather than just a rigid process, really.
Yeah, completely.
One thing I was going to ask, when you're forming your teams, I know you've got an idea of the types of individual and behaviours to go into the team. How important is it having, as I said, that one person or a couple of people in the team that will challenge, that have I suppose that will challenge the status quo, and they will throw up alternative ideas?
It's a balance, absolutely. And I've built teams for projects where you think that is every single person I would have picked given my choice. It's my absolute superstar in every single role. What can go wrong? And then you realise actually you put too many of those superstars in one team. They all argue like Billio because they're used to being the person that challenges and has all the ideas or takes the lead. And actually the team dynamic is just all wrong, even though on paper it's the absolute best team you could ever imagine. And I've had teams where you think, oh God, I haven't quite got the balance I want or enough of this skill set or whatever it might be. But because the team just gels so brilliantly, it doesn't matter. They just get on, they know when to pull in help when they need it. There's no conflict. And a team you think, oh, I was a bit unsure. I was worried I was going to have to provide extra support. Absolutely smash it out the park. So that I'm always surprised with team dynamics and team building. That I wish I knew the answer. Even I've been doing it for probably 7 years in BJSS, but there's still teams I think would be perfect that aren't, and teams that I'm concerned aren't as good as I'd like them to be in terms of experience or whatever it might be. And the people dynamics mean it really works. And I think balance is ultimately the key. So there's a few different personality types I've seen quite consistently that are big, important parts of teams. So you've got that challenger, the person that challenges, makes sure we're innovating, not just settling. There's one I always refer to as the snow plow. That's the one that just drives ahead of the team and pushes all of those blockers and things out of the way and allows that nice clean road for the team to follow. And that's not about wrapping the team in cotton wool. I don't like that idea. People talk about protecting the team. Sometimes that can be really counterproductive because the team need to understand the challenges that you have, but doing that in a really constructive way where that doesn't become their problem. They're just informed, but you're there to sort of push all those problems out of the way so they can, get on with doing their job is important. The doers are the sort of unsung heroes of all teams. I think you need people that are great at cracking on and getting stuff done, and they're much underappreciated in life, I think, the doers. So people who are really great and understand this is what we need to get done, and that's what I want to focus on. And then the other one, which is an interesting one, is the organisers. And I think that's a hard role, because you can be a really officious micromanaging organiser, and that the team don't want to be organised in that way. Or you can be one of those people who's really great at just nudging and pushing and directing, and it's sort of often that sort of scrum master, delivery manager, or BA, or it could be like a tech lead role, where you're just, how are you making sure the team are just kept focused on the things that are highest priority? How are you ensuring that things are there? And they're often the people that do the little things that make a big difference. So they're the one that buy the advent calendar for the team. They're the one that do the little things that just keep that team, happy and feel like there's a bit more to it than just getting on with your day job. So there's loads more. There's lots of books written on the subject, but I think for me, there's some of the things I've seen when you look at that team that worked really well. Why was it? You see some of those personality types consistently.
Is that the organiser? Sounds like a really key role, but not one that everyone can do. Is it the real personable individual then, is it? The real understands that team dynamics or individual dynamics?
It's a really difficult combination of skills, because you're asking for someone who's hugely empathetic and really understands people and is really detail focused and remembers stuff and really good at organising. And if you look at most of those sort of personality, Myers-Briggs type things, they tend to be not in the same person. So if you can find yourself a person that is both of those things, then hold on to them because they're a massive productivity boost to most teams.
Lock them down. I wanted to scroll back when we were talking a little bit about teams before, and you mentioned the storming, then you go the norming, the performing, but you talked about moving a team from one project to the next, and you just think perfect, drag and drop. Are teams so finely balanced that you move them onto something else, and you've almost got to start the forming, the storming, you start that process again?
Really variable. I've had probably one example where a team literally got asked to do basically the same problem for another client, and you pretty much went straight through to performing. It was literally the same client. They'd gone to a different company. I want one of those again. It's about as close as you're going to get. But even though there was a different problem domain, all those things, because all those relationships and the trust was there, and they built a fantastic way of working, they went, we're not changing that. That really, really works. And that was one of those teams where actually what was challenging was when they wanted to scale, how do you add people into a really well-formed team? And that was the challenge there. But sometimes you think it's the same problem, actually technically it might be, but the politics or the delivery environment or lots of other things are different. So I think sometimes you think you're going to skip that, but you don't, and actually you can have the opposite effect where they're used to being in this performing mode, so it's really frustrating to take that step back, and then that can be quite frustrating for a team because they're used to just getting on with it, but they're having to stop and think and do something differently. So taking that step backwards can be quite frustrating if you're used to working in a performing team.
Right. Is that where you've got to get, I know I'm getting from you like as a leader to see the team to team move through it yourself. Those, when it scales back like that, are there sometimes you have to get involved just to help and direct it? Yeah, it's not like directing it, it's just sometimes it's really good to have a third party just come and enter the conversation. And we have lots of different kind of ways of wrapping around our people and teams to make sure they've got support. So we have a sort of squad structure that gives you pastoral support. So if there's things impacting you outside of work that you're really concerned about, you've got a way to raise that in a safe way. But equally, if there's things on project that are more pastoral, you can raise those. We've got a delivery oversight structure as well, which are there. They'll have relationships with more senior people in the organisation you're working with. So if there are problems and you're struggling with your direct stakeholders, they can go and help there. So, but again, like that, the psychological safety thing we talked about, what's that feedback loop? And people need to know if they come to the leadership team, they're going to get a really supportive response. They're not going to get told off or shouted at because this isn't going as well as we would have hoped or whatever. So I think I like to make sure teams are empowered to solve their own problems, but ultimately they know that we're there and we will be supportive and give them as much help as they need.
if they can't solve their problems themselves. So I think that it's a balance of those two things.
Balancing act.
Yeah.
And this sounds like something that's evolved over the years. You've got so much in place from what you were saying to support people, to all the different angles covered for the collaboration, the agile around collaboration, hybrid. It sounds like it's just continually evolving at BJSS.
Yeah, and challenging yourselves, is really important. I'm very, very lucky. My team in Leeds they're just brilliant. That I've been working with them for about, well, I've been working with them for a long time, but as a team we've been together for about 3 years, and there's just no messing around. We all know each other so well. We don't beat around the bush. We're very direct with each other. We challenge each other, and we'll sit down as a team, frequently and go, right, let's look at that thing. Are we comfortable, even though it feels like it's working? Do we want to innovate? Do we want to do more? And like we were talking about different personalities, and there's doers, because I think I'm a bit guilty of loving people that are doers and get stuff done. But there's other people who are really that innovative thinker, and they'll sit back and go, actually, why don't we look at this in a totally different way? Getting that balance and having that really great mutual respect, so we won't go, that'd be ridiculous, let's get on with it. We go, oh yeah, let's think through that idea, let's understand how we would put that into practice. It's great having a team where you don't have to kind of go, well, I'm wondering if I'm going to offend that person. How do I pitch this thing to them? You can just come straight out with it. And if they're upset by it, they'll tell me, and vice versa. And, go. It just makes everything that much more efficient, and the team feel great about it because you can get stuff done.
Yeah.
So I think having that leadership team means doing a lot of those things and innovating and continuing to challenge yourself. It's really easy because challenge is a really welcome thing rather than something people get very defensive about.
Yeah. It's obviously a great culture that you've created in that, because it is like the ideal high performing team, isn't it? You created that environment. You did the psychological safety is already there, so it's perfect. Credit to you guys, really.
Yeah, it's credit to my team. So I'd love to take all the credit, but the reality is they do all that hard work. They're just, I'm very, very fortunate to work with them, and then credit to just the people we have at BJSS ultimately, because they engage with that, and they're the ones that ultimately do all that hard work that make it easy for us to then go and do more. So it's just very fortunate. We have a very high bar, and we are very picky about who we bring into the organisation, but for good reason, because we want to do those things really well. We want to hold ourselves to kind of high standards, and by doing that, we're really fortunate then that it makes everything a bit easier, because you've got the quality of people there to do those things.
Yeah, I suppose it links back to hiring, doesn't it? You hire the right people, it makes the processes a lot easier.
Absolutely, yeah.
As you're pulling the teams together, obviously you're looking at the right pieces of the jigsaw to plug into the teams. How important is having structure and direction for the teams, for people knowing their roles and responsibilities? Does it have to be rigid in that way, so it sets off and everybody knows what's expected of, and you can depend on individuals to deliver certain roles, or can it be a little bit more agile or relaxed?
It depends on the engagement. If you had a really light, nimble discovery, say it's like a short 3 weeks, really trying to get into the depths of a problem and understand it, and be able to therefore say this is what we should do next, you're putting in people who are more experienced, that they don't need a box, they just need to know this is what I'm trying to achieve. And it's like, right, we know between the three of us that's the goal, and we'll work out how we get there between us, because they're sort of used to working in that way. If you're putting together a massive team to deliver a big project, and you've got 4 or 5, whatever it might be, scrum teams working on that, and then you've got some kind of oversight layer, you need quite rigid structure there, because it doesn't mean you want to quash innovation. Don't let teams be able to flex and work in that way, but it would just be chaos if you went, right, everyone crack on. You need to be able to give people, here's how we're going to come together to make sure we're sharing across the piece, here's how we're going to report, here's how we're going to do risk mitigation, whatever it might be. There's lots of things that will need to happen in the project that you do need that structure for. And there's a big difference between, people think of governance as red tape and stopping you doing what you need to do. I think for me, we spend a lot of time looking at that and going, is that lightweight? Is that necessary and sufficient? Is a phrase we often use. So that it's adding value and stopping things get flying over here, rather than just constraining teams from getting on and innovating and doing a good job. So that's a really tough balance to get.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things that comes across to me, I've met you quite a few times over the years, you come across as like a really humble, approachable individual who's got everybody's sort of best interests at heart. So great team leader and team manager. I wanted to go back to the feedback bit. Do you ask for, as a leader, do you ask for feedback on how you're doing? And because I know sometimes you can ask for feedback and it comes and it's quite, it can be quite hard to deal with. But do you ask for that for yourself as well as for the teams and BJSS as a business as a whole?
Yeah, so I think it's absolutely, most critical in those leadership roles. You have such a big responsibility that you've got to welcome feedback, because how are you possibly going to improve and how are you possibly going to evolve and develop yourself if you're not willing to hear difficult things? And again, it's that feedback thing. If you hear feedback and don't like it and get defensive and justify why it's not true, well, no one will ever bother giving you feedback again. Whereas if you go, I struggle to recognise that, but ultimately that's your opinion and that's really valid. So whether I like it or not, that's how you feel. That's a really valid thing, and I need to work on how I behave or interact with people or whatever it might be, so that's better going forward. I think it's in such a natural thing to be defensive. No, that's not what happened. It's like, well, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, it really doesn't. If someone's come back and that's their feedback, that's how you've made them feel. That's what they get from interacting with you. So it's valid. So you need to then go, right, do I want to behave differently? Do I feel like I need to evolve and think about how I behave? So I think it's absolutely critical. We do have formal feedback kind of loops in BJSS, which I think are critical. But I've always worked on the basis of, again, don't wait for a review in 4 months to give somebody feedback. We really encourage people to, again, have those conversations. It's not a problem, but I always prefer someone doesn't find out negative feedback for the first time in a review, because it's actually, I'd much rather be able to have that conversation with you as an individual and find out and work on it at the time. So for me, it's about giving people that encouragement to have those conversations and knowing that, it might feel uncomfortable. We don't really like conflict. We're all very British about it. But actually, 99% of the time, people will respond well for it. If they don't, okay, well, at least it's out in the open now and you can move forward from it, even if it felt like that conflict didn't necessarily de-escalate. So I think it's really, really important. And again, one of the things I love with my team is they don't ever give me much feedback in my reviews, because if they're annoyed with me, they'll have told me way before it gets to review if they want me to do anything differently. And I always ask them when I'm doing their reviews, what more do you want from me? Because it's a really important part of like their own growth. And that might not be that I'm doing something wrong. It might be, actually, I just want to get more of this experience. I want to do more. And so that sort of feedback thing isn't always just about negative. It's also about reinforcing the positives and the really great things people are doing and having a chance to go, these things were brilliant that you did thing, looking at that constructive criticism or constructive feedback as to how you might improve, but also then talking about what are you not doing that you want to do more of, what is that gap and what's that pathway you're really keen to progress on, and how do we provide opportunities for you to do that as well.
That's brilliant. I know in the past you've said to me quite often that although it might be difficult, 99.9% of the times, once you've had the difficult conversation, it comes out with a positive solution and people are able to move on. I was having a chat to somebody the other week, and they were telling me the difference between being nice and being kind. When you get, and to be fair, like, my bad, it was the first time that I'd come across it, and I was like, can you educate me on that? And it's like, obviously being nice, you're trying to please people, you're not giving proper feedback, you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but to be kind and enable that person to develop and learn and continually learn and carry on that journey, you need to be kind. So
absolutely, I couldn't agree more. It's a really great, I've not heard that way of putting it, and it is a really good way of putting it. I've heard various similar flavors of, like, if everyone likes you as a leader, you're not doing it right, because it means you're not making any hard decisions, you're not making any of those tough calls, you're not willing to address conflict, you're just letting it fester away over here because you don't want to have a difficult conversation. And it's very difficult, because the example I often use is, if I was to say to everyone in my organisation, great news, I'm going to give you all £1,000, you'd think, brilliant, no one's going to possibly be disappointed by that. But you'd be amazed, how come they're getting £1,000? I work twice as hard as them. Why are you wasting money on that? We could be investing that in, whatever you do as a leader, there's always some unintended consequence where you think, I did not think anyone could be upset by that. So that, and part of being a good leader, I think, is being willing to do some of those difficult things, because it is ultimately much kinder to have a difficult conversation and try and go, and therefore how do we support this to be better?
Yeah.
But equally not, there's the pride thing there as well, and I think it's important not to take that personally and understand that sometimes you have got to make difficult decisions, but as long as you can explain those to people and be willing to kind of be the face of your decisions, then I think most people really respect that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's about them respecting it, isn't it? And then being able to move on. You move on to together. You mentioned one thing earlier, or you mentioned it a couple of times actually, about innovation in the teams, which is obviously is key to a high performing team. In order to get innovation in a team, often you need the diversity. How do you, so we've talked about this in the past from like a hiring perspective, how do you ensure diversity within the teams? And I mean diversity of thought, so people are there to sort of challenge, and you're getting different opinions and different aspects. It's do you hire with values, values-based hiring, behaviours-based hiring? I've heard of all sort of different concepts. How do you go about it?
A value-based hiring is something I'm always a bit cautious of. Right. I've seen people do that, but then if your values are the only thing, if you think they're my values and I hire in my image, then it's very easy to create very monolithic teams where you don't have that diversity. It's very group thinking. No one else can join it if they don't have any. You almost stop innovation, because unless you happen to agree with that status quo, you're shunned and you're not part of the team. There's a fantastic Pixar short called Pearl, which I'd recommend you watch. It's all about basically about knitting balls, and they go into work, and it's sort of a very laddish culture, and Pearl kind of goes in and has this choice to conform and be part of that, or be herself. And actually, so it's a really interesting look at actually you not getting the most out of that person because you're forcing them into this way of being. And there's lots of things like silly things like company, you have your Friday drinks or whatever, that excludes everyone who doesn't want a drink. So how do you make that a thing where it's yes, you have drinks, but also you have activities and different things that anyone can engage with? So for me, diversity is in almost every case a really positive thing. So how do you, and diversity, a lot of it is hand in hand with empathy. How do you look at different opinions? How do you get people who are going to make you challenge your own views and you challenge your own thought? And innovation comes from a willingness to adapt and listen to others and other people's views. And that might be diversity in terms of protected characteristics, but some of it's just diversity of lived experience. People who've just lived a totally different life to you will approach problems and challenges in different ways, and that forces you to reevaluate and go, God, I never thought of it that way. I'm going to take that on board, add that to my knowledge bank, and reassess my opinion on that. And then, so people think of innovation as AI and excited, but actually innovation is you constantly challenging yourself and thinking, can I do that in a better way? What am I learning from, the day-to-day experiences I'm having as well? And I think diversity is a huge part to play in that. Yeah,
and with the continual challenges, everybody's evolving as an individual and getting better themselves, aren't they? And I suppose upskilling and learning. How important is, I suppose it goes into learning and development, how important is learning and development opportunities within a team? I know I've spoken to you in the past about people having a specific career path that they can move through and they can follow for them to be happy, and learning opportunities. But I know we've discussed not everybody wants to progress in their career to up the ladder, do they? You need certain people in certain places. So how important is the L&D aspect in teams?
Yeah, it's what do you mean by L&D? It's interesting. We've had this debate internally 101 times because it's a classic reason people leave organisations, ultimately lack of career development opportunity, lack of learning and development opportunities. And then when you unpick that, underneath that statement is 7,000 different things, So for me, I guess it's how do you provide a range of different opportunities for people? And I think people really overlook especially in the consultancy, the learning and opportunities you get on your project. That we're constantly, you wouldn't join us as this is the thing you do and there's your box and you sit in that box until you want to move to a different box. Even if you join us as a developer, you might get to do 10, 20, 5, whatever, depending on your kind of what you work on. But different projects could be different programming languages, could be different industries, could be different greenfield versus brownfield versus legacy tech stack. There's like 101 different things you can do. So there's lots of opportunity to upskill, and doing things day in, day out, you learn a lot more than you're going to learn doing a 2-hour course, and then and that doesn't mean courses are not a useful way to learn, but it's as long as you're going to then take that and use it in your day to day. So I think it is really important, but it's about part of that squadly structure is us trying to go, how do we give people a conversation that allows us to tailor what that looks like to them, rather than going, you get 4 hours to do L&D, jobs are good and off you go. And I think that can be a really attractive thing to people, going, great, I get that dedicated L&D time, but then we've seen loads of organisations that have that time and people just don't use it. It's why is it meaningful to them? Well, they do, and they sit there and they do a video and then they never use that skill. And they've forgotten it by 2 weeks' time. So it can be really good that time if you use it constructively, but I think it's about getting rounded, balanced opportunities for people. Yeah,
having different diverse routes and diverse options for people. What about, I've read quite a bit about rewards, so formal and informal. How important are they, I suppose, look at celebrating small wins within a team. Are they key for team harmony, if you like?
Everyone's different. So for some people, that a pat on the back is really, really important. For some people, it's that feeling of recognition. For some people, it's monetary. For some people, it's getting opportunity. And I think there's lots of different ways, and we sort of try and look at it as a bit of a hierarchy. So we do lots of things that are about those sort of small feedback loops. So we do things like Friday shout outs, just giving people a great forum to shout out to your office. This person's really helped me this week, this has been fantastic. We do town hall awards, which is sort of like the next step up, slightly bigger. You get a little prize as a way of, and again, that's voted for by people. So it's people going, this person's really done something extra this month or this quarter. And then one thing that's been really exciting for us, is brand new this year, is we've got BJSS Legends, which is like an annual awards thing. So that's something we're doing first time this year, just trying to see how do we really recognise those people who over a prolonged period have been recognised by their peers as just constantly going over and above, and make a bit more of a fanfare of that, because it's hard. There's so many people doing good stuff in our organisation, and it's really heartwarming. Every Friday you get this Friday shout outs thread in Slack, and you're like, so many people doing great stuff. But you do get some of the people who just again and again, and they'll always come up in those shout outs. They come up in town hall awards. They're just always there because everyone really values the amount of their own time and effort they give to things. So we're just trying that, almost like that next layer of that awards sort of pyramid, to go, how do we really recognise those people that have consistently gone above and beyond. And then that's sort of the more formal stuff. And of course, just saying thank you. The general recognition, just encouraging that behaviour, and then obviously living it yourself, and trying to remember to, if a team have done a big go live, just go past and say, wow, well done, that was really great. And I think you keep doing those small things, they all add up.
Yeah, definitely. Sign of a great culture, isn't it?
It was nice. I get quite a lot is actually teams wanting to show us. So like they'll get an email from the client going, wow, thanks for getting us over the line. They'll forward it onto the leadership team because they want to share, look, we're really excited about this. Look what great feedback we've had. So they're always nice to get as well.
That's brilliant. Really good. Have you, I know we're conscious in time, so I will wrap it up. Last couple of questions. We talked quite a bit about culture and the really positive culture at BJSS. You see it a lot on social media, on LinkedIn. I'm always amazed at the number of people from BJSS that aren't in the marketing team that push stuff out about what they're doing, their projects and their offices and stuff, which is, you must be doing something right if people are willing to do that off their own back. With hybrid working, have you found that you had to work as a business even harder on sort of evolving and sustaining the culture because there's that split between, at home and in person?
It's definitely a fabric of the company thing. As I sort of mentioned earlier, right from the start, we're a practitioner-founded business. So while we've got fantastic colleagues in marketing, fantastic people around the business, we've always been a business that believes in getting the people that are really passionate about the thing they do out there talking about it. And some of that comes from leadership. Rich in my team is chief engineer, and Donna put a lot of time into into that events world and into that thing. And it's about giving people opportunity and making sure they see what an exciting thing it can be to be part of that, and encouraging them to go, I know you've got imposter syndrome about this, but actually you've got some really exciting stuff to talk about. Let us provide a really safe forum for you to do that and sort of grow that experience. So we've always had that. Yes, it was way harder in lockdown because everything was really, and everyone was just trying to get by and survive and deal with, you know, kids being at home and everything else. So I think that was much more challenging. Everyone really embraced this kind of online events for a short period, and then you saw that real this is tedious now. I'm just sick of turning up to an hour-long cocktail tasting Zoom or whatever it might be. So you sort of saw that peak of, I'll have anything to do because I'm bored. And then everyone, as the world opened up, it really waned, and there was that awkward middle period for sure where the world was half in, half out, and it was really hard to know, should I be doing a hybrid event? Should I go all in and do it, you know, in person? But actually over time we found there's certain events we're just doing them in person because that feels like the right thing to do, and I guess the fact that we're getting really great attendance shows I think it is a good thing. But how do you still look after people that are not as comfortable being in big crowds? So we do things like internal engineering forums and lunch and learns, and we'll do them as a hybrid event. So you can come from home, watch it on Teams or Zoom, or you can come into the office and do it. So how do you provide a little bit of all of that? But yeah, there was definitely that middle period where we were halfway through both. It was like, this feels like really hard work.
A slog. And final question, Tom. What's the most important skill, do you think, as a leader of a high-performing team?
Empathy. I think you can. There's lots of really important skills: communication, you know, being dependable, building trust, all those things. But I think ultimately all that comes from empathy, being able to look at things from other people's opinion, other people's perspectives, being able to put yourself in their shoes, being able to make decisions based on trying to take a rounded view of how that will ultimately play out, or different people's experiences based off that decision. I think if you don't have empathy, it's really, really difficult to engage with people, to drive things forward, to be able to do that in a way that the changes you make are net positive in your organisation. So that's probably the one thing I see most leaders fail with is empathy.
Empathy. That's brilliant. Tom, thank you very much, because I know how busy you are. It's been brilliant to have you on the podcast, and thanks for coming in to see me and spending time with me.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, Adrian.
Cheers, Tom. Thank you.